The autumn rain fell in sheets against the towering windows of Thornhaven Manor, casting rippling shadows across the gleaming marble floors. Lady Vivian Marlowe pressed herself against the panelled wall of the corridor, her heart hammering beneath her emerald silk gown as she listened for footsteps. "Lady Vivian, I know you are nearby. Please, grant me but a moment of your precious time. Lord Edmund St." Claire's voice echoed through the hallway, earnest and utterly oblivious to the dozens of guests who had begun to notice his increasingly desperate hunt through the Duke's residence. Vivienne squeezed her eyes shut, mortification burning through her chest. This was precisely why she had refused his proposal 3 weeks prior. Edmund was not a terrible man, quite the opposite. The second son of the Earl of Westridge possessed a generous heart, considerable wealth, and impeccable breeding. Her father, the Marquess of Ashmont, had been delighted by the match. Her mother had already begun planning the wedding breakfast. But Edmund St. Clair had one fatal flaw. He possessed not a single shred of social awareness. His courtship had been a relentless assault of overwrought poetry recited at inappropriate moments, bouquets so enormous they required 3 footmen to carry, and declarations of devotion shouted across crowded ballrooms. When she had gently, so very gently, declined his proposal, citing their incompatibility, he had nodded thoughtfully, patted her hand, and assured her that he understood she was simply nervous about the magnitude of their love. He had not understood at all. "Vivian, my darling dove, your beauty outshines even the stars themselves." She could hear him now, just around the corner, apparently comparing her to celestial bodies, while the Duchess's other guests tittered behind their fans. Vivian's cheeks flamed. She needed to escape, to hide, to disappear, until Edmund finally accepted that she was not, had never been, and would never be his darling dove. Her eyes fell upon a door, heavy oak, slightly ajar, with no light spilling from within. Without pausing to consider the wisdom of her actions, Vivian slipped inside and pressed the door shut behind her, turning the lock with trembling fingers. The room was warm and dimly lit by a single branch of candles and the glow of a well-tended fire. She leaned against the door, closing her eyes in relief as Edmund's footsteps passed by outside, his voice fading as he moved down the corridor. "Thank heavens," she whispered. "I beg your pardon." Vivienne's eyes flew open. The bedchamber, for that was clearly what she had stumbled into, was far from empty. Near the fireplace stood a man in shirt-sleeves and partially unbuttoned waistcoat, a towel draped over one shoulder, and his dark hair damp as though he had just washed. He held a crystal tumbler of what appeared to be brandy, and his expression registered surprise, amusement, and something that might have been fascination. He was possibly the most handsome man Vivienne had ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with features that seemed carved from granite. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes so intensely blue they reminded her of the deepest parts of the ocean. Those eyes were currently fixed on her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. Vivienne's voice came out as a squeak. She cleared her throat. "I am terribly sorry. I thought this room was empty." The man's lips curved into a slow smile that did alarming things to her pulse. "Clearly. I shall leave immediately, of course. Please forgive my intrusion. Lady Vivian, where have you hidden yourself, my ethereal enchantress?" Edmund's voice, now much closer, made Vivian freeze. The man in shirt-sleeves raised one dark eyebrow. "Might that be Lord Edmund St. Clair?" he asked, his tone rich with barely suppressed laughter. Vivian felt her mortification reach new heights. "You know him. We were at Cambridge together. Decent fellow, absolutely hopeless with women." He set down his brandy glass and crossed his arms, studying her with open curiosity. "I take it you are the object of his current devotion." "I am the unwilling recipient of his attentions," Vivian corrected, lifting her chin despite her embarrassment. "I refused his proposal 3 weeks ago, but he appears to believe that my refusal was merely feminine modesty, requiring persistent persuasion." The stranger threw back his head and laughed, a genuine delighted sound that seemed to fill the room. "That sounds precisely like Edmund. He once courted the daughter of a French comte for 6 months after she became engaged to another man, convinced that she was simply testing his dedication." Despite her predicament, Vivienne felt her lips twitch. What happened? She married the other fellow, moved to Paris, and had 3 children before Edmund finally accepted that she was, in fact, no longer available. He shook his head, still smiling. He means well, but subtlety has never been his strong suit. Vivian, are you perhaps exploring the portrait gallery? How thoughtful of you to admire my ancestors. Edmund's voice was now directly outside the door. Vivian's eyes widened in panic. If Edmund found her alone in a gentleman's bedchamber, the scandal would be catastrophic. Her reputation would be destroyed. And worse, far worse, her father would insist she marry Edmund immediately to salvage what remained of her honor. Please, she whispered, meeting the stranger's gaze with desperate appeal. I know I have no right to ask, but... He held up one hand, his expression shifting from amusement to something more calculating. The window curtains, he murmured, gesturing toward the heavy velvet drapes that flanked the rain-streaked windows. Quickly now. Vivienne didn't hesitate. She darted across the room, her silk skirts whispering against the Turkish carpet, and slipped behind the curtains just as a knock sounded at the door. One moment, the stranger called out, his voice carrying the bored authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. She heard the rustle of fabric and imagined him shrugging into his coat, making himself more presentable. The lock clicked. The door opened. Edmund? The stranger said, his tone warm but firm. What brings you prowling about the private family wing? Alaric, I did not realize you had arrived. Edmund's enthusiasm was audible even through the heavy curtain. I thought you were still in Scotland. Alaric. The name struck Vivian like lightning. Alaric Kingsley, Duke of Thornhaven. She was hiding in the Duke of Thornhaven's private bedchamber, behind his curtains, while he entertained visitors in his shirt-sleeves. This was so much worse than she had imagined. I returned late this afternoon, the Duke replied smoothly. The grouse hunting proved less entertaining than anticipated, but you have not answered my question. What are you doing in the family wing? The reception rooms are on the lower floor. I am searching for Lady Vivian Marlowe, Edmund announced with the confidence of someone who saw nothing inappropriate in his behavior. Have you perhaps seen her? Golden hair like spun sunshine, eyes the color of morning glories, a voice like... I have not, the Duke interrupted, as I have only just finished washing after my journey. Edmund, perhaps the lady does not wish to be found? Nonsense, she is merely shy. Once she understands the depth of my affection, she will surely reconsider her hasty refusal. Vivienne pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a groan. Behind the curtain, she was invisible, but could hear every mortifying word. Edmund. The Duke's voice had taken on a note of patient exasperation. As your friend, I must tell you, if a lady refuses your proposal, continuing to pursue her is not romantic. It is uncomfortable. But you do not understand the situation. I understand perfectly well. I also understand that my mother's guests are likely wondering why one of them is racing through the corridors bellowing poetry. Perhaps you should return to the drawing room before someone assumes the house is on fire. There was a long pause. Vivian held her breath. I suppose you may be correct, Edmund finally conceded. But if you should see Lady Vivian, will you tell her that I await her in the music room? I have composed a sonnet in her honor. How thoughtful, the Duke said dryly. I shall be certain to convey your message should I encounter the lady. Now, if you will excuse me, I must finish dressing for dinner. More footsteps, the door closing, the lock clicking once more. Vivienne waited, hardly daring to breathe, until she heard the Duke's voice, warm with amusement. You may emerge from your hiding place, Lady Vivian. The coast is, as they say, clear. She stepped out from behind the curtain, her face burning. I cannot possibly express how mortified. Please do not. The Duke, Alaric, held up one hand, his blue eyes dancing with mirth. This is the most entertaining homecoming I have had in years. Edmund hunting you through my mother's house like an over-eager hound while you hide in my bedchamber. It is the stuff of theatrical farce. Despite her embarrassment, Vivian felt a laugh bubble up in her throat. It is ridiculous, is it not? Completely absurd. He crossed to the sideboard and poured a second glass of brandy, offering it to her. When she hesitated, he smiled. I promise I am quite safe, despite Edmund's apparent belief that all gentlemen are prone to compose terrible poetry and pursue unwilling ladies. Consider it medicinal. You look as though you could use it. Vivienne accepted the glass, taking a small sip. The brandy burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her from within. You are very kind, Your Grace. Alaric, please, we are co-conspirators now, after all. He settled into a leather chair near the fire, gesturing for her to take the opposite seat. Tell me, how long has Edmund been conducting this campaign? 3 weeks. Vivian sank gratefully into the offered chair, her legs suddenly weak with relief. 3 weeks of flowers, poems, serenades beneath my window, and increasingly dramatic declarations in public spaces. My father thinks I am being foolish to refuse such an advantageous match. My mother has begun hinting that my standards are too high. And what do you think? The question surprised her. Most men of her acquaintance never asked what she thought, only what she felt, as though women were incapable of rational consideration. I think, Vivian said slowly, meeting his gaze, that marriage to Edmund would be a slow death of the spirit. He is not cruel or unkind, but he sees me as a prize to be won, a perfect object to be placed upon a pedestal and admired. He has no interest in who I actually am, my thoughts, my opinions, my preferences. When I tried to explain this during his proposal, he simply assured me that my beauty needed no improvement through education or conversation. Alaric's expression darkened. The fool. He meant it as a compliment. That makes it worse, not better. The Duke leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. You are absolutely correct to refuse him. Marriage should be a partnership of equals, not a man acquiring a decorative wife to display like a particularly fine painting. Vivian felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You believe that? I do. His voice was firm, certain. My own parents shared such a partnership. My father valued my mother's counsel above all others, and she challenged him constantly to be a better man, a better duke, a better father. Their love was built on respect, friendship, and genuine affection, not empty flattery and suffocating adoration. That sounds wonderful, Vivian said softly. My parents, they are content enough, I suppose, but theirs was an arranged match. They are cordial to one another, nothing more. Is that what you want for yourself? Cordial contentment? No. The word came out fierce, surprising them both. I want what your parents had. I want someone who sees me, truly sees me, and values what they find. I want conversation and laughter and— She broke off, embarrassed by her own vehemence. And passion, Alaric finished quietly. His blue eyes held hers, and Vivian felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed the hour, a gentle reminder that the dinner bell would ring soon. I should go, Vivian said reluctantly, setting down her glass. I have intruded on your hospitality long enough, and if anyone discovers I was here, then we shall ensure no one discovers it. Alaric rose smoothly to his feet. The servants' stair at the end of the corridor connects to the main floor near the ladies' retiring room. If you use that route, no one will see you emerge from the family wing. You would help me further, even after I invaded your privacy so dramatically? My lady. His smile was pure mischief. This is the most interesting evening I have spent in months. Consider it my pleasure to aid in your escape. Though I confess, I am curious to witness Edmund's face when he learns we are both attending the same dinner. Vivian felt her own smile bloom. We have never met before this moment, Your Grace. Precisely. He offered his arm, escorting her to the door. I am simply a traveller returned home, and you are simply one of my mother's many guests. No connection whatsoever. At the door, Vivian paused, looking up at him. Thank you, Alaric. Truly. The pleasure, he said softly, was entirely mine, Vivian. The way he said her name, low and warm without Edmund's theatrical flourishes, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool corridor air. She slipped through the door and made her way to the servants' stair, her heart racing. Behind her she heard the Duke's door close softly, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, something that would change everything. The dining room at Thornhaven Manor was a masterpiece of elegant restraint. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the long mahogany table, where 24 guests were seated according to strict protocol. Vivienne found herself positioned in the middle of the table, with the elderly Lord Hartwell on her left, and to her extreme misfortune, Lord Edmund St. Clair on her right. "There you are," Edmund exclaimed as she took her seat, his voice carrying halfway down the table. "I have been searching for you everywhere. Did you receive my message about the sonnet?" "I did not," Vivienne replied, keeping her voice low in hopes he would follow suit. I was in the retiring room attending to my appearance. Your appearance needs no attending. You are perfection itself. Several guests turned to stare. Vivian felt her face flame. You are too kind, Lord Edmund. Perhaps we might discuss this more quietly. Why should I be quiet when proclaiming your virtues? The world should know of your... Edmund. The voice came from the head of the table, cool and commanding. I believe my mother is about to make an announcement. Vivian's eyes snapped to the Duke. He was looking at Edmund with an expression of polite patience, but when his gaze briefly met hers, she saw the amusement dancing there. The Dowager Duchess of Thornhaven, a regal woman in her 60s with silver hair and the same piercing blue eyes as her son, smiled at her guests. Thank you, Alaric. I merely wish to welcome you all to Thornhaven and express my delight at having my son home once again. His travels have kept him away far too long. Only 6 weeks, Mother, Alaric said dryly. An eternity, she countered, her eyes twinkling. Now please, everyone enjoy the meal. Cook has outdone herself. As the first course was served, a delicate consommé, Edmund immediately leaned toward Vivienne. As I was saying before we were interrupted, I have composed... Lord Edmund, interjected Lady Hartwell from across the table. I understand you recently purchased a new hunter. Is he performing well? Edmund, momentarily distracted by the question, launched into an enthusiastic description of his horse's virtues. Vivian shot Lady Hartwell a grateful glance, which the older woman returned with a subtle wink. The meal progressed through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Vivian found herself hyper-aware of the Duke's presence at the head of the table. Several times she glanced in his direction, only to find him already looking at her. Each time their eyes met, she felt that same strange flutter in her chest. Lady Vivian, the Dowager Duchess called down the table, my son tells me you have recently returned from visiting your aunt in Bath. How did you find the city? It was a perfectly innocuous question, but Vivian's mind went blank. The Duke had been asking his mother about her. When? Why? That is... Bath was lovely, Your Grace. The architecture is quite remarkable. And the society? Did you attend many assemblies? A few, though I confess I found the constant social whirl somewhat exhausting. A woman of sense, the Dowager Duchess approved. Too many young ladies today believe that happiness can only be found in an endless succession of balls and parties. I have always maintained that true contentment requires substance, good conversation, intellectual pursuits, meaningful connections. I agree wholeheartedly, Vivian said, warming to the subject. Though I admit I do enjoy dancing when the company is pleasant and the conversation stimulating. Dancing! Edmund seized upon the word like a drowning man grabbing a rope. Vivian, you must save me the first waltz at the ball tomorrow night. I have been practicing especially for... Edmund, Alaric interrupted smoothly. Mother has not yet confirmed there will be dancing tomorrow evening. The Dowager Duchess raised one elegant eyebrow at her son. Have I not? How remiss of me. Yes, there shall indeed be dancing, though I had planned to announce it after dinner as a surprise. Wonderful, Edmund beamed. Then it is settled. Vivian and I shall... Actually, Vivian said quickly, I have already promised the first dance to... Her mind raced. She could not claim to have promised it to any of the gentlemen present without causing confusion. But she needed some excuse to avoid dancing with Edmund, whose enthusiasm on the dance floor was matched only by his complete lack of rhythm. To me, Alaric said calmly, setting down his wineglass. Lady Vivian was kind enough to promise me the first waltz when we met earlier this evening. 23 pairs of eyes turned to stare at Vivian. She felt the blood drain from her face. When we met? Edmund's confusion was evident. But, Alaric, you said you had not seen... In the drawing-room before dinner, the Duke clarified, his expression perfectly composed. A brief introduction, nothing more. Lady Vivian mentioned she enjoyed waltzing, and I asked if she would honor me with the first dance. She graciously agreed. It was a plausible lie delivered with such casual confidence that no one thought to question it, except Edmund, whose face had taken on a peculiar expression, part confusion, part suspicion. How strange, he said slowly. I was in the drawing-room before dinner and I did not see either of you there. You were likely too occupied searching the corridors, Lady Hartwell suggested kindly. I believe half the guests heard you calling for Lady Vivian throughout the house. Mortified laughter rippled around the table. Edmund flushed but rallied quickly. "I was merely concerned for her well-being. When a lady disappears, a gentleman must—" "Edmund," Alaric said, his voice gentle but firm, "I believe Lady Vivian is quite capable of managing her own well-being without requiring a search party." Their eyes met across the table, Alaric steady and slightly challenging, Edmund's confused and hurt. Vivian felt a twinge of sympathy for Edmund, despite everything. He truly did not understand why his behavior was inappropriate. "I appreciate your concern, Lord Edmund," she said carefully. "But His Grace is correct. I was never in any danger. I simply needed a moment of quiet before dinner." "Quiet? But why would you need—" "Because," the Dowager Duchess said crisply, "young ladies are not required to be constantly available for conversation, Lord Edmund. We all require moments of solitude now and then." The rebuke was delivered with aristocratic finality. Edmund subsided into silence, though he continued to dart confused glances between Vivian and Alaric throughout the remainder of the meal. When the ladies withdrew to allow the gentlemen their port, Vivian found herself cornered by the Dowager Duchess near the drawing-room fire. "Walk with me, child," the older woman said, taking Vivian's arm and steering her toward the windows that overlooked the darkened gardens. "I wish to speak with you privately." Vivian's heart sank. Had the Duchess somehow discovered her earlier intrusion into Alaric's room? "I hope I have not offended your Grace. If my acceptance of the Duke's invitation to dance was presumptuous—" "Nonsense," the Duchess interrupted briskly. "I am not concerned about a dance. I am concerned about Lord Edmund's pursuit of you, which has apparently grown quite determined." Vivian blinked in surprise. "You noticed?" "My dear girl, the entire county has noticed. The man proclaimed his devotion to you during Sunday service last week, causing poor Reverend Blackburn to lose his place in the sermon." The Duchess's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "Your discomfort this evening was painfully obvious, and I wish to assure you that you are welcome to remain at Thornhaven for as long as you like. If Lord Edmund's attentions become too tiresome, simply say the word, and I shall have my son deal with him." "That is extraordinarily kind, but I could not possibly impose—" "It is not an imposition," the Duchess said firmly. "I invited you here because your mother is an old friend, but also because I have heard excellent things about your character from multiple sources. You are intelligent, well-read, and possessed of both wit and compassion. In short, you are precisely the sort of young woman I wish to know better." Warmth spread through Vivian's chest. "Thank you, Your Grace. I am honored." "Good." The Duchess patted her arm. "Now I also wish to mention that my son is not in the habit of inviting young ladies to dance at a moment's notice. In fact, Alaric generally avoids dancing whenever possible, claiming it is an inefficient method of conversation. That he specifically requested the first waltz with you is noteworthy." Vivian's cheeks heated. "I believe he was simply being kind, offering me an escape from Lord Edmund's enthusiasm." "Perhaps." The Duchess's blue eyes, so like her son's, studied Vivian with disconcerting intensity. "Or perhaps he found something in you that caught his interest. My son is many things, but he is not charitable without reason." Before Vivian could formulate a response, the gentlemen rejoined them, bringing with them the scent of tobacco and port. Alaric made his way directly to his mother's side, bending to kiss her cheek. "Interrogating my dance partner, Mother?" he asked, his tone light but his gaze sharp. "Simply getting to know her better, darling. Lady Vivian and I were discussing literature. Did you know she has read Mr. Wordsworth's latest collection?" "I did not, though I am not surprised. Lady Vivian strikes me as a woman of considerable intellectual depth." He said it so casually, without a trace of Edmund's effusive flattery, yet Vivian felt the compliment more keenly than any of Edmund's elaborate declarations. "You are too kind, Your Grace," she murmured. "Not at all. I simply speak the truth." Their eyes held for a moment too long. The Dowager Duchess cleared her throat delicately. "Alaric, dear, would you be so good as to fetch me some tea? I find myself quite parched." "Of course." He bowed slightly and moved toward the tea service, leaving Vivian alone with his mother once more. "Noteworthy indeed," the Duchess murmured, watching her sons retreating back with an expression of satisfaction. "Very noteworthy indeed." The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of conversation and music. Several guests performed at the pianoforte, including Edmund, who sang a ballad of his own composition that was mercifully short, if painfully earnest. Vivian found herself drawn into conversation with Lady Hartwell and her daughter, Miss Caroline Hartwell, who proved to be delightful company. Caroline was near Vivian's own age, with warm brown eyes and an infectious laugh. "I must confess," Caroline whispered as Edmund launched into another performance, "I have been watching the Duke watch you all evening. He has barely taken his eyes from you." "Nonsense," Vivian protested, even as her heart skipped. "He is simply being polite." "Vivian, I have known Alaric Kingsley since we were children. That man is never simply polite. He is either genuinely interested or completely indifferent, and there is no mistaking which category you fall into." Before Vivian could respond, the Dowager Duchess announced that it was growing late and suggested the guests retire for the evening. There were murmurs of agreement, and people began to make their way toward the stairs. Edmund materialized at Vivian's elbow. "Might I escort you to your chamber, my lady? The corridors can be confusing at night." "That will not be necessary, Lord Edmund," Alaric said, appearing on Vivian's other side. "I am certain Lady Vivian is perfectly capable of finding her way, and propriety suggests that you should not be escorting young ladies to their bedchambers in any case." Edmund's face flushed. "I did not mean to suggest, that is, I would never—" "Of course not," Alaric said smoothly. "I am certain your intentions are entirely honourable. Nevertheless, I believe the ladies are quite capable of managing on their own. Come, let me show you that new brandy I acquired in Scotland. I value your opinion on such matters." It was neatly done, removing Edmund from the situation while simultaneously soothing his wounded pride by implying his expertise was valued. Vivian watched as Alaric deftly guided Edmund toward his study, glancing back once to meet her eyes. The look he gave her was brief but unmistakable, a shared moment of understanding, of conspiracy, of something deeper that made her breath catch. Caroline linked her arm through Vivian's. "Oh yes," she said dryly. "Simply polite. Nothing more." Vivian smiled despite herself and allowed Caroline to lead her upstairs, her mind full of blue eyes and quiet competence and the strange, thrilling feeling that her life had just shifted onto an entirely new course. The following evening, Thornhaven Manor blazed with light. Every window glowed with candles, and the sound of the small orchestra tuning their instruments drifted through the open doors of the ballroom. Vivian stood before her mirror, allowing her lady's maid to make final adjustments to her gown. The dress was one of her favorites, deep sapphire silk that brought out the blue in her eyes, with delicate silver embroidery along the bodice and hem. Her golden hair was swept up in an elegant arrangement of curls, with a few tendrils left to frame her face. "You look beautiful, my lady," her maid said softly. "Thank you, Mary." Vivian took a deep breath, pressing one hand against her stomach to quell the butterflies that had taken up residence there. She was being ridiculous. It was simply a dance. One waltz with the Duke, after which she would dance with other gentlemen, and presumably suffer through at least one set with Edmund. There was no reason for this nervous anticipation, except that she had thought of little else all day. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mary opened it to reveal Caroline, resplendent in rose-coloured silk. "Are you ready?" Caroline asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "The dancing is about to begin, and I have it on good authority that a certain Duke is pacing near the ballroom doors like a caged lion." "He is not," Vivian protested, even as heat rose in her cheeks. "He absolutely is. My brother just told me. Apparently Alaric has been asking every 5 minutes whether the ladies have come down yet." Caroline took Vivian's hand and pulled her toward the door. "Come along. We must not keep his grace waiting." They descended the grand staircase together, the sound of music and laughter growing louder with each step. The ballroom was magnificent, all golden light and gleaming marble, with massive arrangements of white roses filling the air with their perfume. Vivian's eyes immediately sought out Alaric. He stood near the entrance, deep in conversation with an older gentleman, but the moment she appeared, his attention shifted entirely. Their gazes locked across the crowded room, and Vivian felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. He looked devastating in formal evening wear. Black coat fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders, white cravat tied with mathematical precision, and those blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. "Good heavens," Caroline murmured. "If he continues looking at you like that, the entire assembly will be gossiping before the first dance even begins." Alaric excused himself from his conversation and made his way through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who owned everything around him, which Vivian supposed he essentially did. "Lady Vivian," he said, bowing over her hand, "you look radiant this evening." "Thank you, Your Grace, you are very kind. I am very honest." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so brief it might have been accidental, except for the way his eyes held hers. "I believe you promised me the first waltz." "I did," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Excellent." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" As they moved toward the dance floor, Vivian caught sight of Edmund watching them from across the room, his expression troubled. She felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it aside. She had done nothing wrong, refused a proposal kindly, attempted to avoid confrontation, and accepted a dance from another gentleman. If Edmund chose to see conspiracy in innocent actions, that was his burden to bear, not hers. The orchestra struck up the opening notes of a waltz. Alaric's hand settled at her waist, warm and solid through the silk of her gown, while his other hand clasped hers. For a moment they simply stood there, and Vivian was acutely aware of how close they were, closer than propriety typically allowed outside of dancing. Then they began to move. Alaric was an exceptional dancer, strong and confident, guiding her through the steps with effortless grace. Vivian had waltzed many times before, but never had it felt like this, like floating, like flying, like the entire world had narrowed to just the two of them. "You dance beautifully," Alaric said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "As do you. I confess I am surprised. Your mother mentioned you typically avoid dancing." "I do. I find most social dancing tedious, too much effort expended on maintaining conversation while trying not to tread on one's partner's toes." His lips curved into a slight smile. "But this is different." "How so?" "I find I do not mind the effort when the partner is worth it." Vivian's breath caught. "Your Grace." "Alaric," he corrected gently. "When we are alone, or as alone as one can be in a ballroom full of people, I would prefer you call me Alaric. That seems rather forward, given we only met yesterday." "Did we?" His eyes danced with amusement. "It feels as though I have known you much longer, perhaps because our first meeting was so unconventional." Despite herself, Vivian laughed. "Hiding in your bedchamber behind the curtains while you rescued me from my persistent suitor. Yes, I would say that was unconventional indeed. And yet, I find I would not change a moment of it." His hand tightened fractionally at her waist, drawing her almost imperceptibly closer. "Tell me, Vivian, for we are using given names now, I hope, what do you want from life?" The question surprised her. "What do I want?" "Yes. Not what your parents want for you or what society expects. What do you want?" No one had ever asked her that before. Vivian found herself answering with more honesty than she had intended. "I want partnership, respect, someone who sees me as I truly am and values that person, rather than the decorative image they have constructed in their mind." She paused, then added softly, "I want what you described yesterday, what your parents shared. Love built on friendship and mutual regard. Not grand passion and dramatic declarations. Those are Edmund's province, and you can see how well they suit me." She smiled wryly. "I think grand passion must be built on a foundation of genuine connection, or it burns out quickly, leaving only ashes and disappointment." "You are wise beyond your years," Alaric said, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse quicken. "I have known women twice your age who have not learned that lesson. And you? What do you want?" He was quiet for a moment, guiding her through a turn. "I want precisely what you described. My parents' marriage set a standard I have been unable to compromise on, which is why at 32 I remain unmarried. I have met countless beautiful women, charming women, accomplished women, but I have never met a woman who—" He trailed off, his eyes searching hers. "Who what?" Vivian whispered. "Who made me want to compose terrible poetry and serenade her beneath her window, despite knowing how ridiculous I would appear." Vivian's heart stopped, then started again, beating twice as fast. "That sounds suspiciously like what you were mocking Edmund for yesterday," she managed. "The difference," Alaric said, his voice low and intense, "is that Edmund does those things because he believes that is what courtship requires. I would do them because for the first time in my life, I understand the impulse to make a fool of myself for a woman's smile." They had stopped moving, Vivian realized dimly. They stood in the middle of the dance floor, other couples swirling around them, but she could not seem to make her feet obey the steps. "Alaric," she breathed. "I know this is madness," he said urgently. "We met yesterday. I should be rational, measured, cautious. But when you stumbled into my room, desperate and disheveled and absolutely magnificent in your determination to escape an unwanted suitor, something shifted inside me. And tonight, watching you descend those stairs in that gown, with that expression of nervous anticipation on your face, Vivian, I cannot pretend indifference." "I do not want you to pretend," Vivian said, finding her voice at last. "Because I feel it too, this strange, impossible connection. I thought perhaps I was imagining it, that I was being foolish." "You are not foolish. You are extraordinary." He was looking at her as though she were the only person in the room, the only person in the world, and Vivian felt herself falling into those blue eyes with a complete lack of self-preservation. "Your Grace, might I cut in?" Edmund's voice shattered the moment like a stone through glass. They both turned to find him standing at Alaric's elbow, his expression a mix of hopefulness and determination. "This is a private dance, Edmund," Alaric said, his tone carefully neutral. "But surely Lady Vivian would enjoy some variety in her partners. You have been monopolizing her attention for quite some time." It was true. They had been standing still for far longer than was proper, and people were beginning to stare. Vivian could see the calculations happening in Alaric's eyes, weighing social propriety against personal desire. "Of course," he said finally, stepping back with visible reluctance. "Lady Vivian, thank you for the dance. It was illuminating." The way he said it, the weight he placed on that final word, sent shivers down her spine. "The pleasure was mine, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steadier than her hands. Alaric bowed and walked away, but not before shooting Edmund a look that clearly said they would be having words later. Edmund, oblivious as always, immediately swept Vivian into the dance with far more enthusiasm than skill. "I must say you and Alaric seemed quite absorbed in conversation," Edmund said, nearly treading on her toes as he attempted a turn. "What were you discussing so intently?" "Literature," Vivian lied smoothly. "The Duke has strong opinions on Mr. Wordsworth." "Ah." Edmund looked relieved. "Well, that is perfectly proper, I suppose, though I must admit I was concerned when I saw you both standing still in the middle of the floor. People will talk, you know." "Will they?" Vivian kept her voice light, though her mind was racing. "Oh yes, the Duke is one of the most eligible bachelors in England. Any woman who catches his attention is bound to be the subject of gossip." Edmund peered at her earnestly. "You must be careful, Vivian. A man of his position might enjoy a flirtation, but he will ultimately marry someone of impeccable breeding and social standing." The implication was clear. You are not good enough for a duke. Vivian felt anger flash through her, hot and unexpected. "My father is a marquess, Lord Edmund. My breeding and social standing are quite impeccable." "Oh, I did not mean to suggest otherwise. I simply meant that you should guard your heart. I would hate to see you hurt by false hopes." "How thoughtful," Vivian said through gritted teeth. "And what of your hopes, Lord Edmund? Are they not also false?" His confusion was almost comical. "My hopes? You continue to pursue me despite my clear refusal of your proposal. Is that not also a false hope? But that is different. My love is true and constant. I know that eventually you will see—" "Edmund!" Vivian stopped dancing, forcing him to halt as well. Around them other couples continued to move, but she no longer cared about propriety or gossip. "I will not change my mind. I am sorry if that causes you pain, but you must accept it. We would not suit. We do not suit. Please, for both our sakes, let this pursuit end." His face crumpled like a child denied a promised treat. "But I love you." "You love an idea of me," Vivian said, gentler now. "You love my appearance, perhaps, or the notion of having me as your wife. But you do not know me, Edmund. You have never once asked what I think, what I dream about, what I fear. You compose sonnets about my beauty, but have no interest in my thoughts." "That is not true. I value your thoughts greatly." "Then tell me, what is my favorite book? What subject do I most enjoy discussing? What makes me laugh?" When he simply stared at her, speechless, she sighed. "You cannot answer because you have never asked. And that, Edmund, is why we would never be happy together. She left him standing there in the middle of the dance floor and made her way to the terrace doors, desperate for fresh air and a moment alone. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy ballroom, and she leaned against the stone balustrade, closing her eyes. That was bravely done. Vivienne's eyes flew open. Alaric stood in the shadows near the door, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough to hear you reduce poor Edmund to stunned silence." He moved closer, the moonlight casting his features in silver and shadow. "I believe that is the kindest rejection I have ever witnessed. It was long overdue. I should have been more direct from the beginning. Perhaps—" He was standing very close now, close enough that she could see the complex shades of blue in his eyes. "Though, I confess, I am selfishly glad you have finally closed that door. It makes this somewhat less complicated." "This—" Instead of answering, he reached up and very gently tucked a loose curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I meant what I said during our dance," he murmured. "Every word. You have turned my world upside down in less than 2 days, Vivienne Marlowe, and I find I have no desire to set it right again." "Alaric." She did not know what she meant to say, but it did not matter because he was leaning closer, his intention written clearly in his eyes, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not pull away. His lips met hers, soft and questioning, and Vivienne felt the world tilt on its axis. This was nothing like the few chaste kisses she had received from overambitious suitors at garden parties. This was fire and sweetness, and a rightness that made her bones melt. Alaric's hand cradled her face, while his other arm came around her waist, drawing her closer, and Vivienne's hands found their way to his shoulders, anchoring herself against the storm of sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. "I should apologize," he whispered. "That was highly improper." "Please do not," Vivienne replied, her voice shaky. "I find I have no regrets whatsoever." He laughed, the sound low and warm. "Neither do I, though we should return to the ballroom before we are missed. Or before I do something even more improper, like beg you to marry me after knowing you for less than 48 hours. Vivienne's heart leapt. Would that be so terrible? My darling girl. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, his expression serious. "I would marry you tomorrow if I thought you would say yes. But I will not rush you or pressure you or behave like Edmund, confident that my feelings automatically entitle me to yours. I will court you properly, give you time to be certain, and pray that eventually you come to feel for me even a fraction of what I already feel for you." "And if I told you," Vivienne said slowly, "that I am already certain, that whatever this is between us, I feel it just as strongly as you do." Hope blazed across his features. "Then I would say I am the luckiest man in England." "Not yet," she teased, "but perhaps if you continue to rescue me from unwanted suitors and kiss me on moonlit terraces, you might earn that title." "Challenge accepted." He offered his arm. "Shall we return before my mother sends search parties? She has been dropping hints about grandchildren since I turned 30, and if she sees us together like this, I fear she will have the bans read by Sunday." They walked back into the ballroom together, and Vivienne felt every eye turn toward them. Let them stare, she thought. Let them gossip. For the first time in her life, she did not care about propriety or expectations or what society thought she should want. She knew what she wanted. And he was walking beside her, his hand warm beneath hers, smiling at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. The morning sun streamed through the breakfast room windows as Vivienne pushed eggs around her plate, unable to eat, despite the delicious spread before her. Across the table, Caroline was watching her with barely concealed amusement. "You are going to wear a hole in that plate if you continue staring at it so intently," Caroline observed. "Or perhaps you are waiting for the eggs to spontaneously transform into the Duke." Vivienne felt her cheeks heat. "I have no idea what you mean." "Of course not. Just as you had no idea why you disappeared onto the terrace last night, or why you returned looking as though you had been thoroughly kissed. Caroline." Vivienne glanced around, grateful that the breakfast room was otherwise empty. "Someone might hear you." "Then you admit it happened?" "I admit nothing," Vivienne said primly, though her smile betrayed her. Caroline laughed. "You are hopeless, but I am happy for you, truly. Alaric is a good man, the best I know. If anyone deserves happiness, it is the two of you." Before Vivienne could respond, The Dowager Duchess entered, followed by her son. Alaric's eyes immediately found Vivienne's, and the warmth in his gaze made her forget to breathe. "Good morning, ladies," the Duchess said cheerfully. "I trust you slept well after last night's festivities." "Very well, thank you, Your Grace," Vivienne managed. "Excellent. Alaric, do sit down and eat something. You have been prowling about since dawn like a restless wolf." "I went for a ride, Mother. I am perfectly calm." "You are perfectly something," the Duchess murmured, too quietly for anyone but Vivienne to hear. Then, louder, "Lady Vivienne, I wondered if you might join me for a walk in the gardens after breakfast. I wish to show you the rose arbor. It is quite spectacular this time of year." It was clearly not a request. Vivienne nodded. "I would be delighted, Your Grace." 20 minutes later, she found herself strolling through Thornhaven's immaculate gardens on the Duchess's arm, admiring the carefully tended flower beds and ornamental fountains. "I suppose you are wondering why I wish to speak with you privately," the Duchess said without preamble. "The thought had crossed my mind, Your Grace. I will be direct, as I suspect you appreciate plain speaking. My son is in love with you." Vivienne stumbled slightly. The Duchess steadied her with a firm hand. We have only just met. Surely it is too soon. For most people, perhaps, but Alaric is not most people. He is methodical, careful, and extraordinarily difficult to surprise. Yet you have managed to turn him into a lovesick fool in less than 2 days." The Duchess's tone was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were kind. "I have not seen him this animated since his father died 5 years ago. You have brought light back into his life, Lady Vivienne, and for that alone I would be inclined to like you." "You are very kind, Your Grace, but I am not kind. I am practical. I am also deeply invested in my son's happiness." They had reached the rose arbor, a beautiful structure covered in climbing roses of every color. The Duchess gestured to a bench, and they both sat. "Tell me honestly, do you return his feelings?" Vivienne took a deep breath. "I believe I do, though it seems mad to say so. I have never felt this way before, this certainty, this sense of rightness. When I am with him, everything else fades away. When I am not with him, I find myself counting the minutes until I see him again." "That sounds very much like love," the Duchess observed, "or at least the beginning of it. But is it enough? Can something that grows this quickly truly last?" "My dear child," the Duchess took Vivienne's hand in both of hers. "I met my late husband at a garden party. We danced once, spoke for perhaps 20 minutes, and by the time he returned me to my chaperone, I knew I would marry him. We were engaged within a week, married within 6 months, and spent 37 gloriously happy years together before his heart gave out. Sometimes, when the connection is real, time becomes irrelevant." Vivienne felt tears prick at her eyes. "I want that, what you had, what your son described. But I am frightened of making a mistake, of moving too quickly." "Then do not move quickly," the Duchess said simply. "Court each other properly. Take the time you need to be certain. But do not let fear prevent you from pursuing what could be extraordinary simply because it does not follow society's expected timeline." She paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though I confess, I would not be opposed to seeing grandchildren before I am too old to enjoy them." Vivienne laughed through her tears. "Your son said you would say something like that." "Did he? How well he knows me." The Duchess squeezed her hand. "You have my blessing, Lady Vivienne. More than that, you have my wholehearted approval and my hope that you will become part of this family. Now shall we return to the house? I believe Alaric has been watching us from the study window for the past 10 minutes, and if I do not release you soon, he may actually expire from impatience." They returned to find Alaric pacing in the drawing-room, his usual composure notably absent. He looked up as they entered, his expression anxious. "Mother, might I steal Lady Vivienne for a moment? I wish to show her the library." "By all means," the Duchess said serenely, "though I suggest you actually show her the library rather than simply using it as an excuse for privacy." "Mother," Alaric said, pained, "I am simply ensuring you remember proper behavior, darling. Lady Vivienne's reputation must be protected, even here in our own home." "I am well aware of that, thank you." He offered Vivienne his arm. "Shall we?" The library was a magnificent room, 2 stories tall with floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in the hearth, and comfortable chairs were scattered throughout, creating intimate reading nooks. "It is beautiful," Vivian breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "It was my father's favorite room," Alaric said softly. "He used to spend hours here, reading everything from philosophy to agricultural treatises. When I was a boy, he would let me sit in his lap while he read aloud, even when I was too young to understand the words." "You miss him?" "Every day." He moved to stand beside her at one of the tall windows overlooking the grounds. "He was the standard by which I have measured myself, and found myself lacking more often than not." "I doubt that very much," Vivian said firmly. "From what I have seen, you are a man of integrity, kindness, and quiet strength. I am certain your father would be immensely proud." Alaric turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Vivian, I know this is happening very quickly. I know we should take our time, follow propriety, conduct a proper courtship over the course of months or even years. But I must tell you, I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this, of us." "Neither have I," she admitted, "though it terrifies me." "We can take as much time as you need," he assured her. "I will not pressure you or rush you, but I needed you to know you are not alone in this feeling. Whatever this is that has grown between us, I am feeling it just as intensely as you are." Vivienne stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "What if we did not wait? What if we trusted this feeling, this certainty?" His eyes darkened. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I do not want a lengthy courtship filled with chaperoned visits and stilted conversation. I want you, Alaric. I want a partnership like your parents had, respect, friendship, passion. I want to wake up each morning knowing that I chose the right person and that he chose me in return." She took a shaky breath. "I am saying that if you were to ask me to marry you, I would say yes." For a moment he simply stared at her, then slowly he sank to one knee, never breaking eye contact. "Vivian Marlowe," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to value your thoughts, respect your opinions, make you laugh every day, and love you with everything I am for as long as I live." Tears spilled down Vivienne's cheeks. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He surged to his feet and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Vivian realized they were no longer alone. The Dowager Duchess stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Caroline was grinning broadly. "I heard shouting," the Duchess said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought perhaps something was wrong, but I see I was quite mistaken." "Mother," Alaric said, keeping one arm firmly around Vivienne's waist, "we are engaged." "I gathered as much from the kissing," the Duchess replied dryly, though her smile was radiant. "Caroline, fetch my husband's ring from my chambers and send word to the Marquis of Ashmont. He will want to know his daughter is marrying a duke." "Immediately, Your Grace." Caroline practically ran from the room. The Duchess crossed to them and pulled them both into a fierce embrace. "Welcome to the family, my dear girl. You have made an old woman very happy indeed." The next 3 months passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations, formal announcements and social obligations. Vivian's parents, initially shocked by the speed of the engagement, were ultimately delighted by the advantageous match. Her mother spent weeks planning the wedding breakfast, while her father gruffly expressed his approval of Alaric's character and prospects. Edmund, upon hearing the news, had retreated to his family's estate in the country. He sent a brief note congratulating them both, and wishing them every happiness, a gesture that Vivian appreciated more than she could say. She hoped he would eventually find someone who could return his affections, someone who valued his earnest devotion. The wedding itself was held at Thornhaven's private chapel, a small but beautiful ceremony attended by close family and friends. Vivian wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried white roses from the Duchess's garden. When she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Alaric's expression made her heart skip. He looked at her as though she were the answer to every prayer he had ever uttered, and when they exchanged vows, his voice shook with emotion. "I, Alaric Edward Kingsley, take thee, Vivian Catherine Marlowe, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. I, Vivian Catherine Marlowe, take thee, Alaric Edward Kingsley, to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Alaric kissed her with such tenderness that several guests were seen wiping away tears. The wedding breakfast was a joyous affair, filled with laughter, music, and heartfelt toasts. The Dowager Duchess, her eyes bright with happy tears, stood and raised her glass. To my son and his bride, may your love be as strong and enduring as the one I shared with my late husband. May you find in each other friendship, passion, and partnership. And may you fill this house with laughter, love, and, in due time, the sound of children's feet racing through the corridors. To Alaric and Vivian, the guests chorused, raising their glasses. Later that evening, as they prepared to retire to the private wing of Thornhaven Manor, Alaric pulled Vivian into his arms. "Happy, Duchess?" he murmured against her hair. "Deliriously so," she replied, pressing her face against his chest. "Though I confess I still cannot quite believe this is real, that I stumbled into your bedchamber fleeing from Edmund, and less than 4 months later, I am your wife. Believe it," he said firmly, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "You are mine, Vivian, my wife, my Duchess, my dearest friend, and I am yours completely and irrevocably. I love you," she whispered, "and I love you, now and always." He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise, and Vivian felt her soul settle into a contentment she had never known before. This was home. This was where she belonged. 3 years later, Vivian stood at the nursery window, watching the rain patter against the glass. Behind her, she could hear the contented sounds of her son playing with wooden blocks, while his nurse kept watchful eyes on him. Thomas Alaric Kingsley, heir to the Thornhaven dukedom, was just over 2 years old and already showing signs of his father's strong will and his mother's curiosity. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's golden eyes, a combination that the Dowager Duchess claimed was absolutely perfect. "There you are." Vivian turned to find Alaric in the doorway, still dressed in his riding clothes, his hair windswept from his morning gallop across the estate. "Did you have a good ride?" she asked, moving into his embrace. "Excellent, though it would have been better with you." He kissed her forehead, then moved past her to scoop their son into his arms. "And how is my boy today? Have you been good for your mother?" "Papa," Thomas crowed, grabbing fistfuls of Alaric's hair. "Blocks." "I see that. Very impressive blocks." Alaric caught Vivian's eye over their son's head, his expression warm with love. "You look tired, my dear. Are you feeling well?" "Perfectly well," Vivian assured him. "Simply a bit overwhelmed by your mother's latest plans for Thomas's birthday celebration. She wishes to invite half the county." "That sounds like Mother." He set Thomas down, and the boy immediately returned to his blocks. "We can tell her to scale back if you prefer a quieter affair." "No, let her have her fun. She adores any excuse to fill the house with people." Vivian took his hand, guiding it to rest on her still flat stomach. "Besides, by the time of the celebration, we shall have other news to share." Alaric's eyes widened. "Vivian, are you saying—" "I am with child again," she confirmed, her smile radiant. "The physician confirmed it this morning. We shall have another little one by spring." The joy on his face was everything she could have hoped for. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of spun glass. "You have given me everything," he whispered, "more than I ever dreamed possible." "We have given each other everything," she corrected. "A partnership, a family, a love that grows stronger each day. We built this together, Alaric." "That we did." He pulled back just enough to kiss her, tender and sweet. "I love you, Vivian Kingsley, more than words can express. And I love you, now and always." From his spot on the floor, Thomas looked up at his parents and clapped his hands together. "Mama, Papa, love!" They both laughed, and Vivian felt her heart swell with such profound happiness that it was almost painful. This was her life now, not the constrained existence she had once imagined, trapped in a marriage to a man who saw her as a prize rather than a person. Instead, she had found a partner who valued her mind as much as her beauty, who made her laugh every day, who supported her dreams and shared his own. She had found her perfect match in the most unexpected way, by running into a bedchamber, fleeing an unwanted suitor, only to discover the man who would become her everything waiting on the other side. As Alaric lifted their son onto his shoulders and made him giggle with delight, the Dowager Duchess appeared in the doorway, her expression knowing. "I thought I heard laughter," she said, her eyes taking in the scene with obvious satisfaction. "And might I be correct in detecting a certain glow about you, Vivian dear?" "You might," Vivian confirmed, unable to keep the smile from her face. The Duchess clapped her hands together. "Wonderful, another grandchild. Oh, I must send word to, but no, we shall wait until after Thomas's celebration to make the announcement. No need to steal his moment." She bustled off, already making plans, her happiness evident in every step. Alaric set Thomas back down and pulled Vivian close once more. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds, casting golden light across the nursery. "Do you remember," he said softly, "when I told you that you had turned my world upside down, and I had no desire to set it right again?" "I remember everything about that night," Vivian replied. "I meant every word. You are my world, Vivian. You and our children, this life we are building together. I wake each morning grateful for the day you ran into my bedchamber, desperate and magnificent, and changed everything." "As am I," she whispered. "As am I." And as they stood there in the soft afternoon light, their son playing at their feet and another child growing beneath her heart, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not in a marriage of convenience or social expectation, but in a true partnership, built on respect, friendship, passion, and a love that had sparked to life in the most unexpected moment and would burn bright for all their days. This was their happily ever after, and it was perfect. Epilogue. Years later, the great hall at Thornhaven Manor rang with laughter and music as 3 generations gathered for the annual harvest celebration. Vivian, now in her 50s, sat beside Alaric watching their grandchildren race through the crowd with the same wild energy their own children had once possessed. Thomas, now a man of 30 with children of his own, stood near the fireplace deep in conversation with his younger brother, Edmund Kingsley, named for the man whose clumsy courtship had inadvertently brought their parents together. Their sister Catherine danced nearby with her husband, her resemblance to her grandmother so striking that the Dowager Duchess, who had passed peacefully in her sleep 5 years prior, would have been delighted. "They grow so quickly," Alaric murmured, taking Vivian's hand in his. His hair was now more silver than dark, and lines creased the corners of his eyes, but to Vivian he was as handsome as the day she had stumbled into his bedchamber all those years ago. "They do," she agreed. "Sometimes I can scarcely believe that nervous girl who hid behind your curtains became this." "Became what?" "Happy. Completely. Thoroughly happy." Alaric lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "As am I, my love. As am I." Across the room, young Thomas, their eldest grandson, tugged on his mother's skirts. "Mama, tell us again how grandmother and grandfather met." Catherine laughed. "You have heard that story 100 times." "But it is the best story," the boy insisted. Their son Thomas, overhearing, grinned at his parents. "Shall I tell them, or would you prefer to?" "Oh, let them tell it," Vivian called out. "We lived it. You can only relay it second-hand." The younger generation gathered around as Alaric and Vivian recounted the tale, his embellishing certain moments for dramatic effect, hers correcting his exaggerations with affectionate exasperation. They spoke of hidden curtains and persistent suitors, of moonlit terraces and hasty proposals, of a love that had defied expectations and lasted through every challenge life could throw at them. When they finished, their granddaughter, a serious child of 8 with Vivian's golden eyes, tilted her head thoughtfully. "So Lord Edmund was not truly terrible?" she asked. "No, sweetheart," Vivian said gently. "He was simply young and foolish, as we all were once. He meant well, even if his methods were misguided." "And he did eventually marry," Alaric added. "A lovely woman who appreciated his earnest nature and matched his enthusiasm. They had 7 children, last I heard, and he never once composed poetry about any of them." The adults laughed while the children giggled, not entirely understanding but caught up in the joy of the moment. As the evening wore on and the younger generation drifted back to their celebrations, Vivian and Alaric found themselves alone on the same terrace where he had first kissed her decades ago. "Do you ever wonder," Vivian asked, "what our lives would have been like if I had not run into your room that night? If I had chosen a different door, or if Edmund had given up his pursuit, or if you had not been so kind?" "Never," Alaric said firmly, "because I believe we would have found our way to each other somehow. Perhaps not that night, perhaps not in such a dramatic fashion, but eventually. Some connections are simply inevitable. You think we were fated to meet? I think," he said carefully, "that you were worth waiting for, worth searching for, worth every moment of uncertainty and hope. And I think that when two people are truly meant to be together, the universe has a way of arranging things." Vivian leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of him, sandalwood and horse and home. "I love you," she whispered. "After all these years, through all our joys and sorrows, I love you more now than I did on our wedding day." "And I you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You are my greatest adventure, Vivian Kingsley. My dearest friend, my fiercest supporter, the love of my life." Inside, someone struck up a waltz, the same melody they had danced to on that fateful night so many years ago. Alaric offered his hand with a courtly bow. "May I have this dance, Duchess?" "Now and always, my love," she replied, taking his hand. "Now and always." And as they waltzed beneath the stars, surrounded by the sounds of their family's laughter and the warm glow of Thornhaven's lights, Vivian knew that every choice she had made, every moment of fear overcome, every risk taken, had been worth it. She had found not just love, but partnership, not just passion, but friendship, not just a husband, but her perfect match in every way. And that, she thought, as Alaric spun her through the final turn and pulled her close, was the greatest blessing of all. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this beautiful journey. We hope this story touched your heart as deeply as it touched ours. Please subscribe to our channel, like the video, leave a heartfelt comment, and share it with someone who loves powerful romance stories. Your support, truly from the bottom of our hearts, motivates our team to keep bringing you new tales of love, redemption, courage, and the healing power of second chances. Don't forget, at the end of the video, another suggested story will appear. Click it and be surprised by more emotional, unforgettable romances just like this one. Thank you for being here, the Legends of the Fall team.